You're listening to the Gabstreet Podcast, Columbus, Ohio's #1 podcast for underground talent. Every week we have new conversations with interesting individuals who contribute to the Columbus economy and its lively culture. You may find just what you're looking for right in your backyard. Let's get right into it.
In my selected field, I'd say Arianna Huffington, the founder of Fox News, and I think those are my two for journalism, or specifically like online journalism, but for life in general, I'd say Barack Obama and AOC.
Cool.
I really like AOC.
Yeah, I respect both of those people very much as well, so I'd say those are good choices, yes.
Yeah.
What makes, you said, what was the name of the first person? Hutchinson?
Oh, Arianna Huffington.
Huffington,
Yeah.
Yes. What about that person makes them a role to you, or a role model to you?
So I used to be a big reader of the Huffington Post for a while when they were really big. Things have kind of gone down for them, I think, as I've read. And while I kind of disagree with their journalistic principles, I did find it really interesting how Arianna Huffington was able to build her company, because it originally started out as a blog with celebrities on the platform, and then they would all be posting, and then it drove a lot of traffic, and it was getting millions of views a month, and she ended up selling it to AOL, I believe, for $350 million a while back. And it's just something really interesting to follow, and I think that her story is really cool, coming from someone who is both a woman, so a minority in her industry, and then also from someone who didn't have a lot to start with.
Cool. Do you study the way she did that as kind of a blueprint for the new voice?
I did when we were first starting out, because we kind of did shift our business model a couple of times in our mission to what it is now. And so when we were trying to have a lot more contributors come on posting op-eds or just posting content in general, we kind of not copied, but were inspired by her model of basing a lot of the content off of young contributors.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. What were some of those changes from the beginning, or what was your mission at the beginning, and how did it change throughout?
Yeah, so when I originally started the company, it was during, I think it was, as I remember, 2018, after I was working on my city's mayor's campaign, re-election campaign. And originally, I just wanted an outlet for young people to express themselves politically and opinion-wise, but I didn't really know what the new voice was going to be. So.
And you wanted it to be outside of Twitter.
Yeah. Outside of Twitter. At first, we'd just be posting op-eds or news articles, just informant kind of stuff. And then now we're focused on posting more original reporting and facts-oriented content that is from diverse political viewpoints and doesn't strictly adhere to one political side in terms of bias.
Cool. What are some of those steps that you take to avoid bias?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I get that a couple of times. I remember somebody asking me that at school, and I'd say that while bias isn't
unavoidable.
Yeah, exactly. It isn't unavoidable.
Yeah.
People have bias, it's always going to be there. I think there are things that you can do to curb it. So the first we do is try to have a lot of diverse viewpoints, and this comes from where a lot of our writers are location-wise. So we don't just have writers in the US, we also have writers around the world. We had them in the UK, we also had people coming from Pakistan and India, and then also even Africa. So that was really cool, and it allowed us to contribute to a lot of different viewpoints and a lot of news topics that, in the US we weren't hearing, because news here is always about America.
Yep.
And then secondly, also having people come from different political spectrums. So while a lot of our staff do lean liberal, there is a portion of them who are moderate, or we do ask people who are on the right to write for us and contribute, so we don't just become one-sided in a lot of our content.
I'm curious, are you getting more of the moderates and the right-wing writers from the US or outside, or are you getting any from the outside?
Most from the right wing and the moderate are from the US.
Okay.
But from an outsider, usually based on their country's politics, they would be liberal, if we're going to label them as our politics.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Cool. What are some interesting insights that you've gained from interacting with these people?
I'd say the first would be learning about their interest. I think it's like kind of cool to learn what like other teens or other young adults are interested in from around the world, and then you realize that like you share a lot of the same interests.
Yeah.
I'd also say that learning their passions and how interested they are in getting their voice out, because a lot of them would talk about how they didn't really have much of an outlet besides like social media to do so, but now they can write articles, or right now we're also doing podcasts too, so
Nice.
they can use that as an outlet and get that out in the world. So that's really cool hearing about their passions with doing that.
Cool. I'm also curious. I know the world's becoming smaller every day, but
Yeah.
you know, what was the way you went about reaching out to these people or reaching out to the areas they would be in to gain them as writers?
Yeah, good question. Now it's a bit different when we started out. So when I was starting out, originally it was with my friend group. So both my coworkers when I was an intern on that campaign, and then also friends from school, some friends from school, and then some friends from an academic camp I attended, I think the year before, the summer before. And so I asked them, and at that camp, a lot of them were from the world, were from outside of the U.S. Like 50% of campers were like international students, so that's where a lot of the international voice came. And then from there, it was advertising, and so we advertised like Google Forms on social media, and then people signed up, and then word of mouth from friends of friends, and then we got more people to sign up. And so now we mostly get people from either like the word of mouth, the advertising, and then like some people who message our social media accounts asking for like interest if we're taking people, and we always are taking people if you want to contribute.
Cool. And are there any criteria that like eliminate people? Like, are you having to make it competitive at all?
Usually we want someone who's at least 16 or 15 at minimum. Someone who does have pretty good journalism experience. A lot of our writers do either write for their own school newspapers, so we do have like some editors-in-chiefs of their own school newspaper that write for us or are editors for us. Or we also take people who do have experience with a lot of writing in general. I remember one of our writers, who's not as active anymore, wrote for like a contest and won the contest. So we try to take people like that who have a lot of work in writing, or even like to speech and debate too. But experience is pretty important for us.
Cool. So it's one of the main tenets of it is to, you know, focus on a young readership and a young writership, if that's a word. This is purely just a personal curiosity. What happens when you get older with the company? Are you going to hand off the torch to someone? Is that the plan?
I mean, I think eventually I'd probably step down and pursue other things, but I also think with what I've talked about with my executive team in terms of like framing youth is that we want to define our readership or our mission by generation. So like I won't be like 19 forever, but I'll always be Gen Z. So for us,
okay.
like framing it by generation as like something for Gen Z and young millennials is really important for us, especially because like Gen Z are on the rise and it's a big talk on the news right now.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes more sense than like, oh, well, I'm old now, so I have to, like, here you go.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I like the idea of keeping that generational. That's really cool. Let's see here. So, a little bit more of a broader topic than specifically the new voice, which, by the way, I don't know if we mentioned that name until now. He runs the New Voice company. So, there you go, listeners. That'll be in the description as well, don't worry. So, most people our age find it difficult, because I'm 20 years old, you're 19. Most people our age find it difficult to consider themselves leaders. And I think that it probably, I don't know for sure if it was more prominent in younger people in times past that were able to see themselves as leaders, but it definitely feels like right now there's a dangerously low number of people who can. And first of all, I want to know if you agree with me. And second, who or what in your life has inspired that confidence in you?
For the first part, I'd say I kind of think it's like a mix that I kind of like agree and then disagree in a certain aspect. I agree because I do think that there's a general sense of pessimism about the future that like people our age have, feeling unconfident in our leaders and unconfident within our government, especially now with how we're handling the pandemic and also racial tensions in the country. But then I do disagree in a certain aspect that I think that it's somewhat easier because of how democratized activism and social media has allowed us to like get to leadership, because if you see on like social media like Twitter or Instagram, you're noticing a lot of young activists who are rising up. Like for example, I think her name is Mary Copenny, or I forgot her name. She is like Little Miss Flint, the girl who brought a lot of attention to the Flint water crisis in Michigan.
Okay.
And she's like, I think like 13, I believe. I'm probably wrong on that.
Like
but
13 now?
Yeah, but she's pretty young.
So she was like 9 when, or way younger when, or is it just now happening? Or was she 13 then?
I don't know her age, but I know she's
okay.
pretty young.
Yeah.
She's younger than both of us. So people like her, and then also Representative, I forgot her name, but her daughter, Representative Omar in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Her daughter is an activist too. So I think that it's becoming easier for people like us because we have more of an outlet with social media to go out there and spread our voices. But I do think that it's also harder just because of a general sense of pessimism about how politics are.
This is a question that totally just came off the top of my head. But the name Greta Thunberg came into my mind.
Yeah.
And first of all, I want to ask what you think of her. And second, how do you feel about the just sheer amount of, I'm looking for the word, just animosity that goes toward her from people in older generations and such? And if you think that, because to some extent, that could be kind of a good thing because it's making people uncomfortable, which is always what's needed. And it's getting attention to an important topic. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
I actually love Greta Thunberg. I actually was going to name her.
Oh, really?
Like,
okay.
good thing that you brought that up.
Cool.
But I love the work that she's doing, and especially when we had that really big climate march. We actually like covered that on The New Voice, both in an article, but then we were trying to find a way to live stream it on YouTube, but then like YouTube has this thing where like you have to have a certain amount of subscribers on a channel.
Yeah.
So we just used Twitter live stream, but like we had people in London, people in Miami, people in LA, people in New York, I think, and DC, who were like doing their own Twitter streams, and then we asked them if we could like post that on the site so like people could see multiple streams of it. But a lot of Greta Thunberg's work inspired that, and I think that's really cool. But she does get a lot of, like for no reason, a lot of hate.
Vitriol, that was the word I was looking for. Yeah.
A lot of hate and vitriol for no reason. And I think some of it's because she's young. And I remember on Fox News, I don't remember the anchor, but he was talking about how like we can't trust what she's saying, I think, or something like that, because has autism, I believe, and it was pretty ableist of him to say that, but he had to go apologize on national TV about it. But she caused a lot of controversy, and I think for good reason, but gets no hate. I mean, or gets hate for no reason. I think like it's unnecessary.
Frankly, from what I know about autism, that's probably an advantage.
Yeah.
You know, because that can lead to, you know, better ability to research, better ability to focus, and, you know, I imagine that for her, that's the climate crisis is like her thing, you know?
Yeah.
Now, most autistic people have just an interest that is their interest, and they focus on it 100%. So I don't see it as a bad thing at all. And frankly, that is super ableist.
Yeah.
So I didn't even hear about that. That's ridiculous. But sounds about right coming from them. So not that I'm biased or anything, but we won't go there. The rising ability in media for young people to be able to garner attention when it comes to putting out their views and putting out their research is very important. And it's very cool that you are also contributing to that. So, much respect.
Thank you.
Speaking of The New Voice, yet again, how do you create and curate content for the new voice? Who decides what is published and what is not? What is your criteria?
Okay. Good question. I like this a lot because like people don't really get into like the behind the scenes stuff.
So this isn't trade secrets?
Yeah.
I'm okay with
No,
that?
no.
All right, cool.
So as the editor-in-chief, or I'm currently on a break right now because of school, and like I had a family emergency last month with my mom, but so I'm the editor-in-chief.
Okay?
Yeah, everything's
Okay, cool.
really good. She's recovering. It was a surgery, so she's fine now.
Cool.
But I'm the editor-in-chief, and so I decide what gets published and what doesn't. So I actually have like shot down articles before, or have like requested them to be re-edited again, so they can be published. But in terms of deciding how things get published or how things get created, so the process usually goes like we have a schedule, and so we'll ask the writers, can they put their names on the schedule with their date, and then an editor will be assigned to them, and so like they'll put down their topic. Or sometimes if it's a breaking news type of content and we need something written down, we'll put it out there, or like I'll directly message one of our writers that I do trust that can do really well on this topic, and then they'll have that written and it will go to an editor, and then the editor will edit that, and then it will be revised again by the writer, then goes back to the editor for a final edit, and then, well, not a final edit, but like a secondary edit, and then it goes to me for final edits, and then I'll decide whether or not it should be published. But for a lot of our topics, we usually try to go for US politics, world politics, breaking news, opinion editorials, and then, or like general like science topics, but do have, or are intertwined with like world news or politics. So originally, like when we were starting out, we did actually do some entertainment news, but we kind of like cut that out because we wanted to specialize on getting like the bread and butter with like politics and US news.
Thank you. Entertainment news is fun, don't get me wrong, but I think you probably agree, I think there's too much of it already. And I, at least for right now, in this moment in history, it's not the top priority.
No, I mean, I find it funny that like they're still like coming out with articles about celebrities. I remember like when the pandemic was starting, they were talking about how like certain celebrities are struggling during the pandemic, like, and it was photos of them in their mansions and stuff. And it's just like, come on, like millions of people are getting laid off and don't have or like money or are struggling to survive. But I definitely agree with that. I also think a problem with like entertainment news is that a lot of it does not have high journalistic standards compared to like regular news.
Yep.
Because there's so many fake celebrity stories out there, and you don't really know what to believe in.
It's all tabloid.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing one that was it was like Robert De Niro fears that he might only make $7 million this year.
Yeah, I thought that was ridiculous.
Like, boo-hoo. And then I proceeded to go watch The Irishman. But it's like, man, this is what we've come to. Yeah. All right, well, sorry, buddy. I mean, it's going to be a rough one this year, I guess, man. So what have been some of the more difficult topics to cover that maybe have challenged your staff?
I think topics where a lot of research or a lot of like primary sources either don't exist or are hard to get to. Because when we were covering, we had this whole 2019 was a really big thing for protests, and then now like America finally like popped off with protests, but there were so many protests going on in a lot of countries, and so we kind of decided to cover these and do like I guess like a project surrounding like protests and article series surrounding them. So it was like 2019, the year of the protest, and one of the protests that we covered was in Bolivia, and I remember like the first article when we got that out was not hard to get on like information on, because there were some primary sources coming from Reuters or like Associated Press, and then we also were able to go on Twitter and reach out to an activist there who was actually at the protest, and we got to interview her for the article. But then after that, some other like weird things were going on in those protests, and we were trying to get research on it, but we really couldn't. Like there was a lot of photos. We tried to ask people online who live in Bolivia and were there, like what's happening, and it was hard to get information on or confirm them. And then we actually did try to like reach out to government officials for comments on it, And we were able to get one, but then she never got back to us. But then other than that, like, we kind of just had to let go of the story because we couldn't follow it. Oh, it was surrounding their elections. When they were having their elections.
Yeah.
That's what that was about. It was the protest and then their elections. And the elections was really hard to get content on. Because there was some shady stuff going on, I think, like, with fraud and, like, ballot stuffing. And we just couldn't get sufficient information and sources to cover that.
And removing mail drop boxes and such.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that was here. Oh,
That was
wait,
here,
hang
yeah.
on. Oh. Not a country in which the U.S. has installed a dictator. Cool. All right. Not that I'm biased or anything. I'm not. No bias on this show. Gabstreet is purely. We're totally centrist here. No issue. No editorializing. So a little bit more about the origins of the new voice and the structure of it. One silly question here: has anyone aged out of working for it yet?
No, I think the oldest person would be... I want to say me, but I also feel like there was probably someone who was older than me. I think we do have someone who's like a third year, who would probably be like, what, like 21, I think?
Okay. What's the
no.
cutoff?
The cutoff? I mean, we don't really have... I don't think we've set a cutoff, but we've like, since we've like set it up by generation,
Yeah.
but we do try to keep it pretty young, like late teens, or like early 20s. Like mid-20s or like late 20s. I don't think we'd have a problem with that generally. They'd also have a lot of experience too, so...
Cool.
Yeah.
You know, like some people would consider 40 relatively young. That's a pretty broad definition for some people. So
I don't think we've ever had anyone over the age of 25 write for us.
okay, cool, good to know. Did you work with any older adults on setting it up near the beginning?
I asked my mom and dad about advice for it and then like setting it up, but I didn't really need the help of them because we used WordPress as our content management system, so I was able to just like buy a theme and then I spent a couple weeks editing that theme and tailoring it to what the site is now and how we liked it. Or it's the second version. Well, that was the first version, but the site that we see now is the second version. And just setting that up, I didn't really ask any adults other than my mom and dad, and I only just asked them for like advice on how to pursue it. Other than that, I mostly asked people around my age about like whether or not the idea was good, and then doing some research and gauging interest about whether or not like people our age would actually read it. And then we launched in January, I think it was like 2019, and there was like thousands of views that first week, and I was like, oh, like I did not expect that. Yeah.
The first week.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was in the first day, I think we got 2,000, and then like the first week, which was like 4 days after that, because it was on a Tuesday, I believe, it was like 3,000, and I was pretty shocked by that number. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, like I guess like I gotta keep doing this then. Yeah.
I mean, that would keep me going.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a lightning in the bottle moment, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was from a lot of other countries too, because I didn't expect that people outside of America would find this interesting, because like most of the news that we did publish at the time or articles were over like American issues, except for one. We had one over Brexit, who was written by a UK student, but a lot of other countries too followed within that reach.
Was it just really good SEO, or do you know what caused it, or is it just kind of that kind of happens?
I think maybe SEO helps, but I mean, personally, I'm not the best at SEO. I do have a friend who's really good with it, but I haven't taken the time to just sit down and read a lot of SEO articles about how to get super good at it.
Fair enough.
But I think it was a combination of advertising, because we did do advertising on Facebook and Instagram, but then even then, like I was checking the engagements for them, and we didn't get a lot of like likes and like engagement from those posts, but I think people saved them, and then also like word of mouth helped, along with like our writers advertising like their content that they wrote on their social media pages probably helped too.
Cool. Yeah, I was going to ask about that, but you didn't have a worldwide set of writers. Ridership is obviously not a word until later. So I was wondering if that would be a factor, but kind of a lightning in the bottle moment. That's cool.
We did have around like 2 or 3 of them starting out who were in other countries, but not as much as we do now.
Cool.
Yeah.
What are some surprising countries that you have people from? Like, is it mostly one person from a bunch of different countries, or is it pockets of multiple people writing from certain countries? Like, what's the dispersion, I guess?
Wait, writership or readership?
Writership.
Writership. So it's usually one person from multiple countries, with the exception of the U.S., because we have pockets of people writing here. But for the UK, we did have like 2 or 3 people who were writing. Oh no, we have 4, and then now we have around 2 of them who are writing there. But then beyond the US and the UK, it's usually one person from those other countries, like Pakistan. We also had someone from a South American country that I cannot remember, but yeah.
What are some culture shocks that you've found with the people you've been working with?
It's a good question. I think learning about their government and how they function and reading about that, because it's very different here, and then also their own politics, because in the US, like, I constantly hear about US politics. And I was very big on reading politics in high school because I did speech and debate, so I was always reading about US politics, but I think it's pretty interesting hearing about like corruption in other countries, or like their own version of polarization, or especially around Brexit. Like, that was pretty interesting to read about, and how their country was grappling Brexit and handling it, and then now they finally left the EU, but it was pretty interesting to follow in reading about like the cultural reasons, and then also like the very staunch division that has caused a lot of UK citizens between being like pro-Brexit and then anti-Brexit. Yeah.
And it sounds like the same issues plague their system as ours, as in voter turnout.
Yeah.
Because I remember seeing back when Brexit was originally voted on, it was just a bunch of basically old people that voted, and then a bunch of young people that didn't vote.
Yeah.
You know.
I think maybe because like I want to say that I don't really have like any factual evidence that this is true, but it's a hunch. I do think that like some people, I'm gonna apply this with the same situation that happened with like Trump getting elected, but I do think some people thought that like it would not happen, so they were like, oh well, I don't have to vote. Like, some people thought that like even like people who voted for Trump were thinking that he wouldn't win, but like they were just supporting him, and then they were shocked when he generally won.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I can definitely see that being a factor, because I think back then I was kind of in the same spot where I didn't think anything like that would happen.
Yeah.
Just because it seems so ridiculously unlikely.
Yeah.
And then when you have a bunch of people who don't really have much to lose, we're like, yeah, whatever, let's see what happens. Like let's vote that way.
I still remember that election night that happened, because I think it was my freshman year of high school that happened, and like it was a big talk in the US. Like, I think that's when we really started getting polarized pretty badly here in politics. And I remember that election night, and I was watching the votes come in, and Hillary lost Pennsylvania, and I was like, oh my god, this man is actually going to win. And I stayed up until 3 a.m. waiting for it to be called, and I was shocked, and like Twitter was going crazy. Like, no one expected like some D-list reality star to become president.
You were excused. Believe me. Yeah. Yeah, it's we are all still recovering.
Yeah.
And will be for a while, I think. I don't think we have any listeners to this show that are on the right side of things. So, and I don't mean correct, I mean right wing. So, I don't think anyone's offended by us saying anything like that. And if they are, please reach out, because I would love to talk to you. I'm not kidding, I would actually love to talk to you. I had a question in my head that I did not have written down, and now I'm trying to remember it. Let me think here. I'll go ahead and just move on to one that is written down here. So, for more of... here's what it was. Okay, so, forgive me. We were talking about Matter News before we began, so shout out Cassie Young and Jalen Grisso for being the co-founders of that, because that was an awesome outlet. They're more as you know, they're more localized to Columbus.
Yeah.
They focus very specifically on Columbus issues. And I wanted to ask how informed you are on the things going on here in Columbus.
Honestly, a little. I do read the Dispatch sometimes, but I was raised in Louisville, Kentucky, so I'm staying up to date with a lot of the things going on in Louisville, because
that's right.
Yes, there was the Breonna Taylor murder that happened there, but I'm somewhat familiar. I do want to get a lot more involved in Columbus politics, though. My professor last year, when I was taking a public affairs and civic engagement class, actually, I believe, was a board member on, I think, something for city council, or something like for OSU that did have ties to city council.
Okay.
So I was getting into Columbus politics a little, and I did watch one of their Metro meetings. So yeah.
Cool. All right. Yeah, because I was just wondering in what capacity maybe you would have worked with Matter or something like that, or if the New Voice would be branching out into any localized reporting at all, which obviously there is a time and place for both. So, are there any plans for that with the New Voice?
I think eventually, what I was talking to, Cassie and then both Jalen were talking about, like, if I ever, want to come to their, like, training sessions or collaborate on something, I can and reach out. I think it's a time and a place thing, and just finding the right time, like, when that would be. And then also, like, finding more people here in Columbus who would want to be a part of the New Voice, too.
Cool. Okay. What are some aspects of running a journalism outlet such as the New Voice that the general public does not usually hear about?
I think the process for how an article gets published, how an article gets written in terms of gathering information and sourcing, and then also editing. Because I've noticed, or I've been looking at statistics and hearing people online talk about, like, fake news or media bias, and while, like, sure, there's an element of, like, media bias, and there are, like, fake news websites, but, like, calling, like, CNN or, like, Washington Post fake news because you disagree with an article that they wrote about the president is just, like, ridiculous. Like, a lot of the reporters do very, very good work, and it is pretty time consuming, and a lot of fact checking, because you do have to fact check the sources, even if they're anonymous. The sources are legitimate, so.
I would agree with that. A lot of people have different ideas as to what the process of journalism actually is, because it seems like a lot of Americans specifically are sitting around thinking that there are writers' rooms at CNN and Huffington Post and such where they're sitting there and it's like, how can we take him down today? Like, there's no plotting going on. It's just they're trying to. Obviously, there are a couple people that have an agenda, but most of the time, people who are going into the journalism industry are going in because they love journalism and they love reporting the truth and informing people, and that's just lost on so many people right now.
I genuinely think some people give too many people credit about, like, conspiracy theories or how things work, because if people like legitimately wanted to, like, plot out and take down people, like, you could have just made a tweet or, like, some Twitter post about that, like, not conspiring to write a news article about it on, like, CNN or something. Yeah.
It's just something about doing all of that work and going through college education, learning about journalism and the pursuit of truth, only to completely abandon that in the writing room and just go for your own personal vendetta. That just doesn't... I mean, if you look into writers' credentials at places like the New York Times, CNN, they are educated.
Exactly.
They have credentials. They have been... You don't go to college to learn how to take people down. So, at least coming from a college student, that's my opinion on things. But
agreed.
Anyway, let's see. Well, we're about 34 minutes here. What are your goals for 2020 and beyond?
Goals for 2020, I'd say keep expanding our readership and membership, and also grow our podcast sector. Because like we do have 2 shows that are out, and then 1 is in development. And I think we're wanting to partner with another one, but we're gonna have to like reach back out to them. But wanting to grow that, because I do agree that like there's a lot of space for different mediums in journalism, like beyond articles or written content, especially like in audio and visual. And for 2020, we want to expand into audio, but then like outside of that or after 2020, probably getting into video too. I love video content. I do think that like somewhat of it is the future, but then also maybe seeking funding, but we'll have to see how that will go with our readership and growing.
That can be tough.
Yeah.
Yep. I know how you feel. Yep. Cool. I don't know if I'm curious as to if you'll have a long answer or a short answer to this one. What is your biggest call to action for people our age? On your staff or not?
I'm going to do one general, just like for everyone our age.
Okay.
My biggest call to action would be to get out and vote. I think while, yes, there are certain aspects that do make like American politics like pretty pessimistic, and like sometimes it's hard to be an optimist about like the outcomes of things. Voting is really important, and I also would like to remind people that a lot of people did not have the right to vote. A lot of my ancestors who are Black like were not able to vote, or women, and so like a lot of them who did fight for that right, I'm really grateful for that, and being able to have the opportunity to vote as someone who is Black and also who is young. And then also like even people in different countries are not able to have the ability to vote, or don't even have as safe as in elections. Mm-hmm. So I do think that's really important. And then also staying informed on current issues. I know the world is kind of a mess right now and is pretty crazy, but try to stay informed as much as possible with the news, and it's okay to take breaks on the news too. So
it's a little hard not to be informed right now.
Yeah.
Just because of the sheer volume of virus, Trump doing things, it just feels like it's coming from all over the place. So yeah. Seek refuge every once in a while, for sure. Also, keep in mind, at the same time, your right to vote is still not guaranteed in this country right now. There are efforts being taken by people in your government to infringe on that right now in this country. And for a lot of people, for a lot of years, they're like, that would never happen. That can't happen here. But, it's visible. It is out in the open right now. Yeah. They don't care about hiding it anymore. So do what you can. Vote now so that you don't have to lose it later. So it's a good call to action. I agree with you there.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, how can people find you and support you in the New Voice?
So there are several ways. You can reach out to me personally on Instagram at _the_Hughes_. Send me a DM. I'll answer it. Sometimes I am a bit late because I am busy with both working on this and in school. Or you can go to our Instagram account and message us on there at thenewvoice.co. Or you can go to our website it's thenewvoice.co.co. And then there should be a contact form at the bottom, and you can shoot us an email or email me personally. It's on my Instagram as well. So
cool. Do you have any last minute shout outs to make?
I want to shout out my executive team and my writers for making the work that we do so great. And then also Cassie and Jalen. Mm-hmm. I got to meet Jalen, and I have yet to meet Cassie, but it probably will happen at some point, for being really good mentors and then also inspiring a lot of people in the industry.
Cool. Thank you very much for listening to this week of Gabstreet Podcast. That was episode 82. Mark Anthony Hughes. We will be back at you next week, just like every Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. Catch you then.